So as a quick reminder, can you tell us what QQQ is?
Sure. So I'm sure pretty much everyone's familiar with QQQ, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, QQQ is a passively managed exchange-traded fund that tracks the NASDAQ 100 index. Now, what is the NASDAQ 100 index? It is comprised of the 100 largest non-financial companies that are listed on the NASDAQ stock exchange. Now, a lot of people categorize it as a tech fund. You know, we like to say that it's more than a tech fund, that it's a fund filled with technologically focused and innovative companies that really have performed quite well, you know, since the fund's inception 25 years ago.
And we heard the panel before just talk about technological transformations and innovation and performance. Can you talk more about that? Sure.
So, you know, overall, when we're looking at really the confluence of innovation and performance, you know, if we look at it through the lens of QQQ, you know, and obviously what's going on most recently, a lot of investors have been focusing on the Magnificent Seven, with NVIDIA being the leader there. But if we take a look over the past 10 years, you know, the Magnificent Seven used to be FanMag. You know, before that it used to be FANG. And really, what has drawn investors to this small group of stocks? Well, first, it's a group of companies that have become industry leaders and disrupted the sector that they were in. But I think more importantly, they've provided, you know, strong growth during uncertain times that have really fueled, you know, performance of portfolios. You know, we've also seen, obviously, a lot of those companies be heavyweights within QQQ. And the question that I get most commonly is, why is that? You know, why do a lot of these companies that we see grabbing a lot of the headlines, how do they end up in QQQ? You know, especially since it's a passive product. But I think the real question people should be asking themselves is, how are they always positioned, it feels like, for this next big shift that's happening within the way that we live our lives? And they show a high propensity to innovate. Now, you being involved in data, right, you know how important it is to quantify that. So we quantify innovation really through two metrics, the first being patent activity and the second being R&D spend. And what we've seen from companies within the NASDAQ 100, within QQQ, is that they're outspending your average S&P 500 company or your average Russell 1000 growth company on research and development. Well, I mean, we heard Lauren and Sandeep talk a lot about uncertainty and volatility. How do you think about that through the lens of QQQ? Yeah, I mean, there definitely is a lot of uncertainty out there. I think overall, we perhaps are going through a shift in the way people look at uncertainty and volatility and how they invest. You know, you have days like today in the market where there's geopolitical issues that come in where all equities are not shielded from that. But I mean, overall, we saw a shift with the way people invest during these higher volatile times, really starting, you know, in the second half of 2020. And people have really started to position themselves in their portfolios to be exposed higher to companies that perhaps have a greater chance to growth of revenue, earnings, and dividends going forward during these uncertain times. And, you know, that's exactly what we've seen from QQQ. So is it fair to say that QQQ companies have a culture of innovation? I mean, I would say so. I mean, you take a look at the top 10 holdings alone, about what those companies have done, where they've been with a lot of the major changes that we've seen in the world. Yeah, it does feel like it's a culture, but excuse me, if we take a step back, I think it's a culture that NASDAQ has really grown and created through the great work that they've done throughout the years. The NASDAQ stock exchange really has been the place, if you're the hot new tech company or hot new technologically focused company, we would like to say, you're going to list amongst the names of Apple, Microsoft, and NVIDIA on that exchange. And that's really what's been the power behind QQQ's performance through the years. All right. Any last words? No. Again, it's great to be here at these local events and to speak to you. Yeah. Thank you, Paul. And thank you for sharing your insights as part of the Invesco QQQ Sponsor Spotlight. Thank you.